Hi Halloweenies, I'm Ozzy the Horror Cub. Take a trip with me to Camp Crystal Lake as we review 1980s Friday the 13th. Let's get into it. What I love the most about this film is that if you homage this and ask the Ghostface question to people of who was the original killer in Friday the 13th, and they say Jason Voorhees, you know for a fact that they don't like horror movies, because we all know that Pamela Voorhees was the original killer. Hashtag spoilers, hashtag it's a review, so get into it. Directed by Sean Cunningham and produced by Paramount Pictures, this movie was distributed in 1980 and tried to capitalize off the success of 1978's classic, Halloween. The second that John Carpenter's Halloween came to town and everybody saw that you could make a small independent horror film and you could get big box office results, everybody wanted to try to copy that success. And what did you need? You needed a masked killer, you needed a bunch of horny teenagers that are either smoking drugs or engaged in premarital sex, and you need a sole survivor, a final girl, to take down the killer at the very last frame. And do what Halloween did. Set it on a holiday. The 13th really does try to capitalize off the success of Halloween. This did usher in the brand new era of the slasher subgenre. Films were now getting bloodier and gorier as the 1980s were progressing, and all of that is thanks to Tom Savini, and his makeup work is credited in the first Friday the 13th. He was a Vietnam photographer. See somebody getting their throat sliced in one of these films, it looks so realistic. Tom Savini ruled the 80s, and his special effects are unmatched. Dawn of the Dead was what put him on the map, one of the George A. Romero zombie films. After that, Sean Cunningham noticed him and had to have him in Friday the 13th. The original Friday was written by Victor Miller. This film for me uses 3 different films to create its identity. It uses Psycho. You see, in Psycho, Norman Bates was crazy and pretending to be his mother, and keeping on the legacy of Norma Bates. However, in this film, it's Pamela Voorhees avenging her son. So you have the twist that they did there. It's Brian De Palma's Carrie, and the fact that the ending uses that same type of shocker, where Carrie's hand is coming out of the grave. That took me by surprise. So too did Jason coming out of the lake and grabbing our final girl Alice. It's a brilliant ending, and I have to give it credit for what it is. The music, how it builds, it's so slow. You really do think that Alice is safe. She's already decapitated the killer, and then Jason just comes out of nowhere and grabs her, which would launch us on to the sequels moving forward. Before there was even a script developed by Victor Miller, Sean Cunningham actually just took a page out in Variety and advertised the scariest movie you've ever seen from the producers of The Last House on the Left. He'd previously worked with Wes Craven on that film. The financiers of The Last House on the Left then worked with Sean Cunningham to produce the Friday the 13th movie. Now this was a minimalistic horror film, obviously capitalizing off the success of Halloween, and from that you had everybody trying to copy off the success of Friday the 13th, because now you're launching into The Burning with Cropsey, you're launching into Sleepaway Camp with Angela. The film opens in 1958 where we see 2 camp counselors getting butchered after they're having a little bit of naughty time. We don't blame you for getting down with it, but kids could be in danger and you need to keep a watchful eye out. That's right, counselors, somebody has been stalking the cabins and we don't really know who it is. All we know is that blood and mayhem is on the table. We're also getting this great soundtrack. The music in this film comes from Harry Manfredini, and I gotta tell you, I get shivers whenever I hear the Friday the 13th score, whether it be the and there's a lot of debate as to what it is. It's actually supposed to be kill, 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 ma, ma, ma. He put that into a sound mixer, and that's what Echo generated out of it, the kill, 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 ma, ma, ma. And a lot of people just go ma, ma, ma. But it's actually ma, ma, ma. Because it's kill, 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 ma, ma, ma. Because that's what Pamela Voorhees is saying as she's chasing Alice in the final frames of the film. We don't know who the killer is at this point. They're keeping the killer in POV, which is classic. It's very much like John Carpenter's opening to Halloween. The music, though, is great in this film because even though it has the classic whenever I even play the Friday the 13th video game, I get creeped out. And yes, I do play it for PlayStation 4. Am I any good at it? No. But do I adore Friday the 13th? Yeah, it's scary music. To me, when I play that video game and I turn off the lights, even last night when I was watching the film and I had all the lights off, and it's like, it really does put you in the atmosphere. It has a great soundtrack to it. Great horror films have great soundtracks that make it stand out. Whenever I'm in the woods, I automatically think of the just like whenever I'm in the water, I immediately start thinking of the Jaws theme as I see my legs flapping in and out of the water. I probably look like a seal to a shark. You know what? In my defense, I probably am delicious. So let that shark eat me, because you ain't gonna get me, baby, because just like Alice, I'm a fighter and I'm a survivor. Cut to present day where we find Annie trying to hitch a ride to Camp Crystal Lake. But as she's trying to hitch a ride, we run into Crazy Ralph, and he's claiming that Camp Crystal Lake has a blood curse on it, and she shouldn't go there because she's doomed. Everybody there is doomed. I love how they have a prophet coming out and they're just warning them, don't go in there, don't go to that place. And that trope would be used in horror movies going forward. Look at American Horror Story 1984. The second they get to the gas station clerks warns them about Mr. Jingles. So these are tropes that are now carried forward. Although Halloween ushered in what the tropes of the horror film was, films like Friday the 13th really did expand on the mythology of the slasher subgenre. And of course then, moving into 1984, Wes Craven then takes the subgenre and spins it on its head with A Nightmare on Elm Street. So I think that's the great thing about the horror genre. It's always constantly evolving and constantly shaping. Even constantly growing and shaping from having the killer in the first movie being Pamela Voorhees to now being Jason Voorhees. And we've gone so long with Jason Voorhees, we've even been to space with him. From New York City to space, we'll go anywhere with you, Jason. We just need more Friday the 13th films. But seeing Jason back on our big screen, especially seeing now the success of Michael Myers, I think it needs to be done. But should they go down this origin route? Because this story is an origin movie. It's not about Jason Voorhees. This story is really about Pamela Voorhees and how she tried to protect her son. Because she's tried multiple times to close down this camp. Hence why now it's be called Camp Blood and it's got a blood curse. I think she jinxed the water, she's killed the 2 camp counselors, she's done shenanigans left and right to ensure that this camp can never be opened. But to know that your son is now drowned because the camp counselors should have been held responsible. They should have been watching Jason. And poor Jason. I mean, you see Jason in this movie, and he is deformed. And I think that adds to the sympathy of the character. And especially in this first film, you do sympathize with the fact of this was a deformed child that was looking for acceptance and didn't find it at this camp. And the camp counselors just letting him drown in the water as they were just off having shenanigans. It's unspeakable. So you really do follow this anti-hero of Jason. And when you go into the sequels, you do sympathize with him to a certain extent. I mean, then you get to Zombie Jason in Part 6 and you're like, okay, this is just carnage, and you don't really care for the teenagers at that point. You want a high body count because it's just so much fun. Jason Lives has got to be my favorite Friday, hands down. But talking back about the original, it's a very slow burn as we go through it. You really don't see that much blood. Even with the first camp counselor's death, the slash of the machete gets her, and you know what? I wish they really would have gone off on it. Because at the very end of the movie, you are getting these nice Tom Savini bloody practical effects, but they really low-key did it in with the editing. They really don't show you too much. Maybe for me, looking at it from a lens of today, I'm expecting a little bit more from my kills, but I was a little bit disappointed with how the opening kill goes about. But now Annie's coming to town, and she's being chased by an unknown POV serial killer as well, because she's hitchhiking to Camp Blood. She's the camp cook. Love this outfit that she's wearing too. The thing about it is, she's got her sweater wrapped around her, and it's this bright coat sweater, and she's running through the woods as she's already jumped out of the car because this killer, this unknown POV killer, is now chasing her through the woods. We don't know who it is. We don't know that it's Pamela Voorhees. And the thing is, she should have ditched that color because it was so bright, and that's how Pamela was able to track her. She probably would have got her nonetheless, but if you want to be a final girl, I'm going to tell you something. Rip off any clothes that might be a distraction because you don't want to work with that. You want to be Kilimanjaro in these kind of situations. You don't want them to catch you. So ditch the fabrics that are going to catch attention. Something that I thought was funny too, the killer is driving this kind of like Jeep-esque truck. I don't know much about cars. I don't know much about cars, but it's like a Jeep-esque truck, and I've never realized that when Mrs. Voorhees does have the final confrontation with Alice, it is that same car. Stupid me in my head, it was never clicking. At the very end, when she's opening the car and you do see the dead body in it, yeah, of course you understand that that's Pamela Voorhees' car from the first scene of the movie. However, when she first pulls up, when she first gets out of the car and you don't see that there is a dead body in the front of it, I really didn't clue in the first time that I saw this film that Pamela was responsible. And just the acting alone is what sells it. She sells crazy. As all of this is happening, all of our camp counselors are coming in and they're meeting Mr. Christie. He's been revitalizing Camp Blood, and he's been trying to get it ready. One of the camp counselors, you're gonna notice to be Kevin Bacon. I mean, could you forget that nose anywhere else? Whenever I see that nose, I instantly think of American Dad, Roger, when he starts impersonating Kevin Bacon. And Kevin Bacon wasn't a star at this point. There's something to be said about all these A-list Hollywood actors that get their big breaks being in horror films, whether that be Johnny Depp in 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street, whether that be Kevin Bacon in 1980's Friday the 13th. Even look at Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey being in 1994 Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, and they did not want that film to come out. Kevin Bacon, I think, has the best death scene in this film. It happens about halfway through. He's just engaged in a little sexy time activities, when all of a sudden an arrow just launches through his neck. And I swear to God, this movie affected me in the neck region for months to come, just because the way that it was shot, it really bothered me, just the way that the arrow is piercing through him. And you have the great kill that happens in the shower scene after that. I think the problem with this movie is, and a lot of the Friday the 13th movies, they don't really expand upon the characters. You get a couple characters fleshed out, but it's not really meaty. You get your final girl is always fleshed out in Friday the 13th. That's something that I think needs to be said about the Friday the 13th series. No matter which version of the film that you're watching, whether it be Chris in part 3, whether that be Ginny in part 2, these films have great final girls. They kick ass and they're really resilient. So they do take a page from Laurie Strode and Nancy Thompson in that regard. Alice was really versatile in this movie. She could take you down. She could play strip Monopoly, take your boot, and then kill the killer whacking off your head. So now Mr. Christie's going into town because he needs to get supplies. There's a rainstorm coming. Alice doesn't know if she really wants to be at this camp or not. There's a little bit of this sexual tension going on with her and Mr. Christie. And I gotta tell you something, when he had his top off, although he doesn't go for like the traditional look of what I think a hunk should be, I was kind of into it. I think there's something to be said about the second a man swings an axe, I think you're into it. Whether that be Jason Voorhees, whether that be Pamela Voorhees. Pamela Voorhees isn't a man. Now I'm going sleepaway camp. But there's something to be said about a man swinging an axe. It just does it for me. The bodies of all the counselors quickly start piling up, and Alice starts to realize that something isn't right. So she starts to go investigate. She's joined by Bill as they start going throughout the camp. At this point of the film, the storm has completely overtaken Camp Crystal Lake. The rain is falling and Brenda, the camp counselors, and she hears a child crying in the distance. As she goes to investigate, it takes her to the archery course, where she's then struck by an arrow by Mrs. Voorhees. I really do enjoy this kill. There's foreshadowing of this at the very beginning of the movie, because one of her friends accidentally almost shoots an arrow at her. Quickly, everybody is taken down like fodder. It's left to just be Alice and Mrs. Voorhees. Betsy Palmer shines as Mrs. Voorhees, and I know in a lot of interviews she throws so much shade at these movies, and she throws so much shade at just the original Friday the 13th. She thought that nobody was going to see this film, but she really does act her ass off. All of these actors were professionally trained Broadway actors, so I do think they bring that whole Broadway camp with them, especially when the fight starts happening between her and Alice, and she's slapping Alice. The first slap that they actually did, it was a real slap. Betsy Palmer actually did hit Adrienne King, and Adrienne, I guess, screamed out, and she's like, "She hit me, Sean, she hit me." Something that you have to watch if you really want to know all the facts about Friday the 13th, it's called Camp Crystal Memories, and it's now available on Shudder. They give a detailed analysis of every single film in the Friday the 13th series. Now, before you know that Mrs. Voorhees is crazy, she is comforting Alice, and you really don't understand, well, who this person is and why she's here. There is a bit of a sinister vibe now, because she then goes into a story about a young boy that drowned in 1957 at Camp Crystal Lake. The counselors weren't paying attention. His name was Jason, and today is his birthday. This is his mother, and she has come back for revenge. She sees Alice as a threat. She can't let the camp open, so she goes crazy. Final girl fight ensues. They make it to the beach. Alice decapitates her. It's a special effects guy's hand coming out. It's not Betsy Palmer's hands that are reaching out in the air. You can notice by how hairy they are. But you get a great decapitation scene. You get a great fight. I really do love these two characters together. That spiel that she gives about Jason, and it's his birthday, and it's Friday the 13th, everything that Mrs. Voorhees is saying in that moment, I love. Betsy Palmer really does sell this character. Plus, I love a good chunky blue sweater. I think the problem with this film is it is dated. Looking back on it now and having the 2009 remake, which does condense the first 4 Friday the 13th movies into a singular film, I think that movie really raises the bar. I think if I ever did my Friday the 13th film ranking, this film might actually shock you how low it is in terms of how I view the entire franchise as a whole. I will say, Part 6 has to be the best, hands down. Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, it really just understood everything that a good Friday the 13th film was and ran with it at that point. However, the original Friday the 13th starts the mythology of the character of Jason, and that's all thanks to Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham, because they really did create the basis of who Jason Voorhees was and expanded it into the sequels. And who would have thought that Jason would be a character to come back? At the end, when you see the bubbles coming out of Camp Crystal Lake, is Jason alive? Was it real? Was this all a dream? Because Alice wakes up in the hospital and she's told by the police officer that they didn't find a boy in the lake. And she's like, well, Jason must still be there then. Cinematography wise, there's nothing really too special to look at this movie. It's not something like John Carpenter's Halloween, where you look at it and you say, wow, those are some beautiful tracking shots that Dean Cundey was able to pull off. This film, you can tell, was done quick, cheap, and easy. I think this film was done in about 29 days in New Jersey. They really had to just quickly, cheaply flip it, rob the ideas off of Halloween and Psycho and Carrie, and make their own little movie about a bunch of kids in a bunch of cabins running from a serial killer at night. And you know what? It worked. These films have now grossed billions of dollars. And it all started with the original Friday the 13th. So although it's not on the level of horror films and what they are today, it really did help cement what the horror tropes would be, and really did move them into a new era. I mean, Friday the 13th, 1980, for being as bloody as what it was, you look at the original 1978 Halloween, you barely see any blood. Maybe you see a little bit of blood when Laurie's busted her hand after she's trying to break out of Lindsay Wallace's house in the kitchen. However, you really don't see that much blood in Halloween. It's kept visually down so that it's more of a psychological terror. What Friday the 13th does, and with all the clones that followed from Friday the 13th, whether that be My Bloody Valentine, whether that be Sleepaway Camp, or whether that be The Burning, maybe that's because this was the Tom Savini era, but what they really pushed to the forefront was the bloody special effects. And that's what Friday the 13th is known for, having big, bloody special effects. When a character is getting axed, when they're getting macheted, the blood work is great. When a character is getting their throat slashed and the blood spewing out, that's the realism of Tom Savini. That's what he brings to the table. So it's taking out that psychological approach to horror films and really just putting the gore in your face. And then that leads to the problem of carnage candy and you caring too much about these kills than you do about the actual victims. I think that's something that a Halloween movie does significantly better than a Friday the 13th movie. They really do get you to sympathize with the characters, except for Tina in Halloween 5. Other than that, they really try and get you to sympathize with the characters. In Friday the 13th, I have a hard time sympathizing with any of the characters because they're just the archetypes. You just have the stoner, the jock, and they're all just there for fodder. They're all there just to be killed by either Jason or Mrs. Voorhees. The only person that you actually do get really introduced to, that you actually do start caring about, is your final girl. Whether that be Alice, whether that be Ginny, whether that be Chris, or whether that be Tommy Jarvis moving forward into Friday the 13th, 4, 5, 6. But we had to have the original. I'm glad that the original exists. However, for me, it's dated. The cinematography to me is a little lackluster. To me, it's not till the final frames of the movie, when Alice is inside that canoe. She's got her hand in the water, and Jason does pop out. Love that, because now you're getting the foliage of the moment. You really do feel like you're there in the moment with that character. I wish the cinematography that they used at that ending shot, the whole Brian De Palma Carrie-esque sequence, was used throughout the movie more, because that's beautiful, to really get the foliage, to really get a scope of where you are. All in all though, Friday the 13th, it's a fun time. It's a dated movie. I do suggest that if you're gonna watch a Friday the 13th movie, start with the original and then start building up to the others, because the others do improve upon the mythology that the first one created. And then, you know what, after you watch the first one, that's when you watch the 2009 remake, because you know what, although the 2009 remake had shitty characterization, the kills were amazing. It takes the first 4 movies and it runs with it, and you do get to see Jason Voorhees acting like a beast. But Pamela Voorhees does a great job too. Of course, we don't have our hockey mask Jason just yet, but he's coming, guys. The acting is a little subpar. The directing is a little shaky, because Steve Miner up to this point, all he was really directing was pornos. Softcore. Grab your popcorn and grab an appreciation for nostalgic 80s movies, and you're gonna love it. Whether that be appreciating Tom Savini's effect, or Victor Miller's script about a child that was drowned at Camp Crystal Lake and a mother is simply avenging her dead son. You're gonna turn this movie on, and it is gonna be a fun ride. It is a short film. Watch the first one, then start getting into the other Friday films. I think you guys are gonna like it. Halloweenies, that's all the time that we have left for today. Smash that subscribe notification bell, because next week, we're taking a trip to Woodsboro to rank all 4 Scream movies. Until next time, stay spooky.